All right, let's get to the starting lineup and rotation stuff here. We're going to do this parallel tracks, okay? Gabe Vincent starts. Let's just say that, okay? And I'm glad we did it before the game. We did a whole segment of what if Gabe doesn't play, because that ended up, a lot of that stuff ended up playing out. Gabe starts. I'll go with you first, Brady. What does the lineup look like? What should it look like?
I still feel like we had this discussion last night. It's Haywood Highsmith or Caleb Martin. I think at this stage, I think now is the time to make the adjustment. You're not sitting back and just letting Boston dictate everything. So it's one of the two. If Gabe's playing,
even if Gabe starts, you're taking Love out. You're taking Love out. And you're playing Highsmith or Martin.
Okay. I think either way, I think you have to go that route. And I think if it's Gabe, you probably lean Haywood Highsmith and just say, try to muck certain things up defensively, because I think one of the most schematic important things I've seen from Game 5 specifically, to Alex's point, was the way they dealt with Tatum. Like, it was kind of pretty obvious that the parallels to his point between Jimmy and Tatum were dead on. Like, we had this discussion of like, would you worry about everybody else or do you worry about their best player? And it seemed like Miami kept getting put in this trap of the showing and recovering, and it was just one pass away, two passes away, open three, and it was like, you cannot come out the gates again in this game while the Celtics are just going to pull up Kevin Love into every action for Tatum and just say that this is going to be our offense. You have to be able to have some versatility, and I thought the things they did with Haywood Highsmith in terms of the switching and the zone was just really good and forced much better looks. So I do think it's Haywood Highsmith, but I get your point, because I know, Ethan, you said Caleb Martin before in this scenario, because this is like all hands on deck. Like, it really is. It's like, this is the time. This is not time to be worrying about rotations. There is no rotation right now. Like, it's just play your best players for as many minutes as you possibly can. So maybe to that point, it's Caleb Martin, but we've just seen him come in and just be kind of a refresher at so many points. So why? I think you got to let the offense run between Jimmy and let react to that offensively, and then have Caleb still be that punch off the bench. And then ideally, the question, I know that where you're going next, but you ideally want your Kyle, Caleb bench to stay intact, and Duncan, because they've been so good, because we've seen every time they bring him into the starting lineup, like last night with Kyle, things go south. So I really do believe, I think Haywood Highsmith should have been playing for a little while. But with that said, that means Caleb or Kevin Love's kind of the backup five, in my opinion. The idea is, just because he's backup five, I still think Bam's minutes need to go up. They need to be at a high. You cannot be worrying about foul trouble. You cannot be worrying about any of that. Kevin Love could play kind of the spot minutes that Bam's out, but not for long. Like, Bam needs to be playing in that 40-minute range.
All right, Alex, I'm going to give you the other question. Say Gabe doesn't play. What does it look like?
Oh, man. Well, look, I agree with Brady as far as, Caleb or Highsmith need to start, whether or not Gabe is back. And you really, really hope Gabe is back, because you saw, with this last game, how much the offense has missed, and, just how many of those possessions he was helping take up throughout a game, right? Even though if he's not their first option or even second option, he was carrying a lot as far as the role players and the shot creation outside of Jimmy and Bam. So it's really tough. Like, you're going to need a lot more from Kyle. We said it before. I don't know who else you start other than Kyle at this point. Like, you can make maybe a case that Duncan could start, and you start Duncan in one of Caleb or Highsmith. I think that could be a fun way for this to go, just because, that's one place where they have consistently found ways to generate offense. It's obviously just risky because you would have him out there with Max, but at the same time, you just have Max out there with Love. And I would say Duncan's been a more solid defender in this series than K-Love has.
Alex, let me ask you this one though. Could you, if you want to say, okay, Kyle, go back to the bench, run the bench. Okay. Could you start Caleb and Love?
Look, I wasn't against that before. I actually mentioned that before the series started, but that was when I knew that they were going to do the two big lineups. And since they've kind of moved away from that, I do think, Love should not be a staple in that starting lineup. And it's not just to blame everything on him, because the starters period, the way they started off the game specifically, like, everything was bad. It wasn't just K-Love, but like what Brady was talking about there, the showing and recovering, it's constantly getting guys so far out of position. We know that they concede threes and open threes to some of their lesser shooters, but the amount of distance and time those guys had to set their feet and take a shot, like, those are practice shots. And I've said before, like, good indicators of how well the Heat's defense is performing is how much time is there before a closeout comes. Like, if there's an open three, but it's the closeout is there, it's sharp, it's usually because their defense is on a string. Last night was the complete opposite. Like, it's one thing to leave Smart and Derek wide open, but those guys had like 3 seconds to set their feet, think about the shot, do whatever they wanted, and then take the shot. Like, it was just that much time, and it wasn't all K Love. I just think there were breakdowns, and part of what they're doing with the showing and recovering, it's a lot to keep up with now because they've got 4 perimeter players out there and then a stretch 5 who you are worried about shooting. So it's a lot of ground for K Love to cover. So I think bringing him off the bench and kind of putting him in Cody Zeller's role is the way for him to go in this series now. I think he can be productive there as a spacer. But, you know, like ever since the 2 big lineups stop, I think now you got to go back and, like Brady was saying there, you play your best players. I could see the case for either one of Caleb or Highsmith. And, you know, we've talked about before him wanting to keep the bench rotations intact. And maybe that's the case for Highsmith and why he started in the second half. But to me, you play your best players. And Jimmy, Bam, and Caleb have kind of been your big 3 in this playoffs. You know, and I think Caleb is right there. Gabe is right there. You got to play your best players at this point. You know, he was a starter for a long time. They already know how to work with each other. And if you're going to go zone with Love as the backup 5 because you're worried about it, and Duncan is also coming off the bench, and I think Highsmith fits really well coming off the bench. So I probably lean Caleb as a starter, Highsmith off the bench. We see more of him, like Brady was talking about, less of Love, and not only because of him, just more because I want to see Jimmy and Bam play 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I want to see them, you know, this type of game. What was everything for it throughout the season, right? All the minutes management and all the missed games and all of that. Like, you've gotten to this point now where they know they cannot lose, right? Like, I'm sure they would have confidence going into Boston Game 7, all of that. We know they're confident. We know they can win over there. But they have to treat this game like a Game 7, which means you got to play your star players a shit ton of minutes. Excuse me, sorry for the language. You got to go Tom Thibodeau mode for a game like this. So I'm there.
Caleb Martin should start. I'm just putting it out there. I like the Highsmith idea, but look, if you're going to get Caleb to 40 minutes, then play him the first 6, okay, of each half, all right, the first 8, and you go from there, and then you mix and match. I'm with you. And we're going to get to this on the other side of the break, but he needs to start. And like you mentioned, their lineups with him as a starter were good this year. That was, and honestly, the rebounding numbers were better at times with Caleb as a starter. And even the lineup with Lowry starting with him. We talked about it. They didn't get to it as much as they thought they would, but that was the opening day starting lineup. Go to the opening day starting lineup, especially if they're playing small. Like I don't. Then you play Caleb, you put him in the starting lineup, and honestly, I would seriously look. Even if Gabe does not play, I would seriously look at putting Caleb in the starting lineup with Love or even Highsmith. I don't think Kyle Lowry can start this game. I just don't.
Caleb and Duncan is my sleeper pick if Gabe doesn't play next game.
That's an option too, but I don't think Lowry can start this game. I don't. His last 4 games have been atrocious, and as good as he was in the previous games, which we gave him credit for, he's at the unplayable stage right now, which is typically when he pops up and has a game like this. But he's been unplayable, okay, over the last few games. I'm sorry, he just has been, and we gave him credit for the good stuff, but it hasn't been.
Remember what he did Game 6 last year.
I understand it. I get it. He rose. That's why I'm saying he could rise up for one, but he's not doing any of the things they need him to do in that role right now. So I think you have him available, but I don't know that I would start him. You cannot get off to a bad start in this game. Put Caleb Martin on the court regardless. That's the way that I view it.